What happens when you take a gamble on a barn find Suzuki X7?
Well, you get this, a bike buried at the bottom of a garden for over 20 years.
Oh, poor thing, look at it. I have to confess, I brought this with my heart and not my head.
Honest opinion, looks a bit like a pile of
This wasn't just a tired old bike, it was a time capsule of neglect. Every inch told a story, of decay, of weather, of time doing its worst. The further I looked, the worse it got. Not a single part escaped the years. It wasn't just worn, it was very broken and barely holding together.
It was a mess.
Every single part of this bike required attention. This wasn't just a quick fix, it was a complete teardown, a full-blown restoration. Every bolt, every bearing, every seized and rusted component had to come off. There was no cutting corners, no easy way out if this bike was ever going to see the road again.
Do you know what I love about my journey so much? Is taking a bike that was once a complete wreck and rebuilding it from the ground up to finally ride the thing. Get this frame out of the boot. The frame has been sandblasted, ready for paint.
But just look at what we started with. Hard to believe this is even the same frame.
This is how I plan on painting the frame. I've got it floating nicely there. I'm hanging it from some steel wire. I'm a little bit nervous because if I make a mistake, I could end up crying.
Painting a frame isn't just about making it look good, it's about making sure it's well protected too. This 2K filler primer will help seal the surface, fill in any minor imperfections and give the top coat something solid to bond to.
Pleasantly surprised at the quality of that primer. I can see the whole frame is covered. Now we're ready for the top coat, and this is where I'm certainly nervous because if I get this part wrong, if I create any runs, game over, and I might even have to resort to having it all sandblasted back down again if it gets really messy, but let's not jinx it.
With the primer down, things are starting to look promising, but this is where it really counts. Mixing up the 2K top coat, I know there's no room for error. One run, one heavy pass, and it could undo everything. This is a moment where patience, control, and focus matter most. The goal here isn't just to cover the frame, it's to lay down a finish that'll last, and that's a lot easier said than done.
Look at it, just look at that for a finish. Could be better, but you know, it's good enough. It is good enough.
And if you're wondering, what about all those other rust-covered parts? Well, I got to breaking them all down. Each piece went through my own sandblasting cabinet, stripping off years of corrosion. What started out looking like this was slowly transformed into this. And once they were clean and prepped, I gave them the same treatment. Fresh paint.
Fork leg bottoms, centre stand, the yokes, and they are looking so good. I'm so happy with the results, and they're well protected because that is 2K paint.
Even the wheels got the full treatment. Sandblasted back to bare metal, then painted in this rich anthracite finish, which I think really gives them a modern edge while still feeling true to the era. And with fresh tyres fitted, they are finally ready to hit the road again. Eventually.
Anyway, let's start rebuilding because we're ready to do so.
After weeks of stripping, blasting, prepping and painting, this is a moment I've been waiting for. Time to start putting the Suzuki X7 back together. And finally, it feels a bit surreal finally saying that. Every nut, every bolt, every bracket has been cleaned, restored or replaced. And now going right back where it belongs. All those late nights, seized bolts, rusted parts, this is where it starts to pay off. This might look like a simple reassembly, but trust me, getting to this stage has been anything but simple. There's something deeply satisfying about this part of the process, watching a pile of parts slowly come together to form something recognisable again. It reminds you why you started. The hours spent getting here suddenly start to feel worth it. And what's great about building a rolling chassis is that you finally get to see the bike stand on its own again. It goes from just being a frame on a bench to something that actually resembles a motorcycle. You're no longer just dealing with parts, you're building a machine with presence, with personality, with purpose. I've learned a lot from this rebuild so far, especially how important the details are. Taking the time to clean every thread, prep every surface for paint, it's a slow process, but it's the kind of slow that builds something to last. And as each part clicks back into place, I'm reminded that this isn't just about restoring a bike, it's about bringing a forgotten machine back to life, piece by piece, step by step. It's about reviving something that was forgotten. Though there's still a long way to go, the engine's still in bits, but today is a turning point, the moment we go from tear down to rebuild. This bike has a long history, and now a new chapter's beginning. One that's built not just from old metal, but from patience, persistence, and maybe a bit of stubbornness too.
And there we go, look at it. Starting to resemble a motorcycle again. Looking at it sat on two wheels, I'm getting ever so more excited to complete the Suzuki X7. And I must say, I am liking the contrast between the anthracite and the gloss black frame. I was a little unsure at first, still a hell of a long way to go, but the foundations are there. Now when it comes to the engine, of course, that requires a full rebuild also. And you might be wondering, what am I going to be doing about that? Well, let me explain. I don't know how to rebuild a crankshaft, neither do I have the tools. So what I'm going to have to do is outsource that. I've got new rods, new seals, bearings, you name it, all ready for that crank to be rebuilt. When it comes to the barrels, you know the troubles we went through trying to remove these bad boys. Almost there, yes! I'm going to have those professionally probably bored out and honed or ready for new pistons. So you may have noticed something. I use this stuff a lot, GT85. In fact, I've used it so much on this rebuild, I've even lost the lid. When you're dealing with a bike that's been rotting away for over 20 years, you need a product you can actually trust. And GT85 has been genuinely my go-to product throughout this rebuild. I've used GT85 throughout this entire process, from the strip down to now the rebuild. Cleaning, protecting, removing stubborn, rusty bolts, even to get things moving smoothly while we put the Suzuki X7 back together again. GT85 is honestly one of those products I believe every workshop should have, because it just comes in handy constantly. So, thanks GT85 for supporting this rebuild. Cheers GT85. Now then, with the chassis coming together nicely, it's time to make a start on the fairing, and we begin with this very rusty petrol tank.
Years of exposure had left it covered in rust, scratches, and tired old stickers. So first up, I got rid of the decals. Then it was straight into the sandblaster to strip away the remaining paint and corrosion. But once it was bare metal, the real state of the tank became clear. Pitting everywhere. The surface was scarred and uneven, far from the smooth canvas I needed for paint. So I broke out the filler and carefully started working into the worst areas. Once cured, I sanded it back smooth, trying to get every curve and contour as clean as possible. To really level things out and seal the surface, I applied a thick coat of filler primer, a key step before any colour can go on. And once that was fully cured, it was time to sand again. Not just the tank, but the fairings too. By this point, the sun was setting, and I was still chasing perfection. But all the prep work paid off, because this is the base coat, a deep rich pearl red that absolutely transforms the tank. Once the colour cured, I carefully applied the vinyl graphics, and to lock it all in, one final step: multiple coats of lacquer for gloss, protection and depth.
Check this out, look at that, that is looking proper. Obviously, I need to now allow it to dry for a couple of days, allow that lacquer to go super hard before I then polish it all up. So in the meantime, I'm going to get myself on to a few other little jobs.
While the fuel tank cures and that lacquer hardens up, I decided to crack on with one of the more satisfying jobs, rebuilding the brake caliper. This one was in rough shape when it came off the bike. Seized piston, baked on grime, but underneath it all, the bones were still solid. So I cleaned up the housing, painted it black, and carefully rebuilt the internals using new rubber seals. Everything was going together really nicely. It's always rewarding seeing parts like this come back to life, but not everything always goes quite to plan.
Little bit heartbreaking. That's the brake caliper I just rebuilt, and as you can tell, the paint has started to come away, and that's because a little bit of hydraulic fluid spilt on the caliper. I wiped it off and the paint came with it, and then as I wiped even more, it got even worse. Mistake I made was using high temperature paint that you would use on a exhaust system. Clearly, this paint is no good for a brake caliper. We learn and we move forward.
So, back to the sandblaster we go. It's never fun undoing your own work, but when you're aiming for a proper finish, sometimes you just got to bite the bullet and start over.
And there we go, the brake caliper has now been sanded back down and it's ready for paint. Now I would say this is a minor setback. The reason why it's not a minor setback, now I need to primer it, wait a day for it to dry, paint it, wait for it to dry, and then rebuild the caliper. It is a little bit frustrating, honestly, but what can you do? What can you do? You've got to do it properly. Now something else that's a bit of a shame is this front mudguard. I was going to have it replated, chrome replated, but when the original chrome was stripped away, we discovered, or the chromer discovered, that there's tiny little pinholes. My solution to this is I'm going to use some JB Weld and then I'm going to smooth it all down and then primer it and then paint it.
Now I know some purists might be throwing a bit of a hissy fit right now. That's not how you restore a classic. But here's the thing, this build is about bringing the bike back to life, not chasing perfection at any cost. Sometimes it's about making smart choices with what you've got, especially when parts are rare, budgets are real, and time is of the essence. Besides, once it's painted and fitted, I reckon most people will be too busy enjoying the bike to care what's underneath.
Now let's see if we have better luck rebuilding this Brake Master cylinder, which I painted in a gloss black 2K. I should have done the same with the brake caliper.
After what happened with the caliper, I'm really hoping this goes a bit more smoothly. The master cylinder might look small, but it's one of the most important components on the whole bike. If it doesn't work properly, you're not stopping. I gave everything a thorough clean and carefully fitted all the new seals and internals. Thankfully, this one seemed to go together without a fight. Small win, but I'll take it.
It's been a couple of days now, so hopefully the lacquer on this tank as well as the fairing should be hard enough in order to, well, rub down and make look like a mirror.
Now that the lacquer's had a few days to fully cure, it's time to make this paint really shine. I start by wet sanding the surface, working my way up from 1000 grit to 2000. Carefully knocking back any imperfections and orange peel in the clear coat. This bit always feels a little scary, taking sandpaper to fresh paint, but it's all part of the process. Once the surface is flat and smooth, it's on to polishing. Bit by bit, that dull finish starts to come alive, revealing the depth and gloss of that pearl red underneath.
How have I managed that? Look at the finish. Sometimes I surprise myself. So chuffed with the outcome. And do you know what? I spent so many hours preparing this tank to then paint it. So to see it in this condition, well, I couldn't be happier. And as for the mudguard, well, that's the outcome. Gloss black and looks tidy. How about this? Look at the seat. So obviously I didn't do this. I had somebody else do it for me, but they were able to keep the Suzuki X7 250. Do you know what? I must tell you this. I was so shocked. When I inquired about having this seat redone, I was quoted £400. This cost me £60. So it's not original, but I think it's better than original because that is real stitching. As for the brake caliper, well, I've repainted that, and this time we've done it properly. 2K paint, rebuilt, looking fresh. Things are getting rather serious in this workshop. So serious, in fact, check out my BOR banner. This is thanks to Sail Flags. They sent me that out, they designed that. Look how that's upgraded my workshop. Thank you, Sail Flags, for sending me out this banner because it's just made my whole workshop look that bit better. Now we've come so far with the Suzuki X7, however, we still have plenty left to do. So, should we crack on?
There was a time when this bike meant something to somebody. You can almost picture it. Ripping through the streets, two-stroke smoke in its wake, the sound of freedom in the air. But over time, it was forgotten. Left to the rain, the rust, the quiet. I found it buried, broken, and to most people, it was beyond saving. But I couldn't leave it there, because every machine like this deserves a second chance. And slowly, through every hour spent sanding, blasting, painting, it started to come back. Not just as a bike, but as a story worth finishing.
Well, all the long days, long nights, weeks and weeks of work, we are slowly getting there with the Suzuki X7. Of course, there's still a lot to do. Let's take a sneak peek at the engine. Crank's been rebuilt, new pistons. Also, I want to say, I'm going to be giving this away. If you didn't know that already, check out my Patreon. I'll link it on the screen. Do you reckon I've done a good job?
Oh,
Yeah. What do you think? Because the last time you seen this, what did you say? It was a piece of...
beep. good now. Well done.
There's still a few things that I do want to improve on this Suzuki X7. I'm not totally happy with the outcome, such as the mudguard. I do want that to be chrome. I did bank on the whole look of this bike having a front mudguard being chrome, so I think, yes, I'm going to try and, well, figure that out in due course. Also, yeah, the engine needs to go in the frame and we need to ride it. That will be coming up in the next upload. For now, considering how far we've come, I think we're doing all right. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you on the next one real soon. Make sure you subscribe. See you later. Bye.